Okay, let's go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth class. Again, we did two shiurim on pre-Gemara, and the last class number 3, last Wednesday night, we actually got into the Gemara itself. I'm going to review. Generally, I'll be doing this at all our classes. We'll review first. We'll start with where we started from, which is the beginning of Shir Aleph, and we're going to work our way through. Shir Aleph that we're talking about, which is the first, again, this is the first of the classes of the shiurim that we're doing. I'll just skip ahead for a moment and show you the actual text of the Gemara. Let's start with that first. Here we go. So we see the words of the Gemara here. Again, just please, if you're kind enough, just follow my cursor here. Right over here, Gemara, Matzah, Peras, Mefuzaran. These are the entire, the first shir, all of it just covers these 9 words. Matzah, Peras, Mefuzaran. If you remember, we talked about in one of the introductory classes, we talked about, getting whispers and trying to get a better handle on what the words mean. This is really a perfect example. The text is rather short. Tonight's shir number 2, what we're learning today there are many more words there. But this is really a short one, and let's just review it quickly. So we have the text of the actual Gemara in clear before us, before we go and take it apart. So matzah, if he found, remember the word Mitziyus means to find. Peres are fruits. Gari pri ha'adama. Mifuzaran. Mifuzaran is spread out. You find the word not that common. You find it by mefuzar or mefarad. When Achashverosh was talking about destroying the Jews in the Megillas Esther, he said that they're spread out all over the world. Mefuzar means a matzah. If you found peres mifuzaran, fruit that is spread out. That was a quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if he found spread out peras, he's allowed to keep it. Vikama, and the question was, how much of it? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, kav ba'arba amas. That's the one kav, a measure. We'll review that quickly. We covered that in lesson number 2. It's 1 kav. We just passed that bottle, showing the size of a kav. So kav, if it's 1 kav ba'arba amas, that you're allowed to keep. And the nature of Gemara is such that, remember we discussed that there were Tanaim, the Talmidei Chachamim who originally codified and put the Mishnah together. The Mishnah are very short, to the point halachas, and the Gemara is a discussion about it. This is a perfect example. So the Mishnah says, okay, so we're starting with a memra. A memra is a statement. That's one of the 8 logical component types that we discussed. So this is a memra. A memra means a statement, and we have the statement from you see here again from our Mishnah. That statement says, matzah, peres, mifuzaran, if he found peres, if he found fruit that was spread out, so he's allowed to keep it. Now, again, just very quickly, a quick reminder, we have, again, this notion of giving us the whispering, so to speak, which we said whispering, just for quick memory, I'm referring to it as if it's a given. The whispering means when we have insider talk, or there's talk of with the understanding that we have a certain knowledge base, or if the text is a little more curt, then we put brackets or other ways of doing so. Matzah peres mifuzaran. If he found scattered produce, he may keep it. Okay, that's the Mishnah says this. Now the Gemara comes with a question: Vikama, how much does it have to be scattered in order to keep it? Now, usually there are. We're going to discuss this more in the Gemara today. It hinges on 2 types of 2 factors. Number 1, how much value is there in what's out there? Okay, how much value is there in the amount of produce that we could find? Okay, so how much is there? In other words, another way of looking at it, is it worth the time of the person to go get it? And the second thing is, how much bother is it? How far apart is it scattered? Those are the two real main issues, right? How much value is there? Is there $5 worth of grain there? Is there 5 cents worth of grain there? And how far is it spread apart? Those are really the two things, really the only two things that matter here. So the Gemara says, V'kama, how much does it have to be scattered? Right? The kama is a question. How much does it have to be scattered in order to be able to keep it? So the Gemara answers, excuse me for a moment. Let me get to Rabbi Spivak, okay, who, the author of the book, who put out these pictures of grain, obviously showing a larger amount here, a medium amount and less. So how much does it have to do with? So the Gemara says, we come with a tshuva, an answer on the question. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kav ba'arba amos. This is a measurement, a kav, one of the units of measurement that they had in those days. You see, it's a sort of like a 64-ounce Coke bottle with some of the top missing. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak answers kav, one kav, ba'arba amos in 4 amos. If it's spread out on 4 amos, that would be already enough distance there that the person would be allowed to keep it. Just by frame of reference, an amma is a measure from the elbow till the middle finger. That was considered an amma of the height of an average person. And just to give you an idea of what 4 ammas are, typically, it's sort of like 1 amma for 2 feet, so it's about 8 feet by 8 feet. And you see that hand over there. So if it's a kav and arba ammas, he's allowed to keep it. If it's obviously either, we'll see, more than a kav, right? There's more value there. Or we'll see in the Gemara, we're going to offer some scenarios. What would be the halacha if it's less of a bother? So matzah peres mufazon v'kama kav ba'arba amos. Okay, and just very quickly, we'll just do this one step. Identify the steps. So here we go. Underline again. Underline the memra. Underline the statement. Matzah peres mufazaron. That was the statement. V'kama, circle the sheila. V'kama. How much does it have to be in order for him to keep it? V'kama, how much is it that the finder is allowed to keep it? So that's the second thing. V'kama, how much does it have to be? And then we answer, it's a kav ba'arba amos. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, a bracket, the tshuva. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, kav ba'arba amos, 1 kav and 4 amos is what it is. Let's go to the second lesson. We sort of left in the middle of this shir bays. Now, just for the folks, remember we were talking about the setup of a daf. We had a page. So this is Rabbi Spivak's code, just so if you're looking up the text of the Gemara itself, so read this that I just put in purple here. That's Chaf Aleph. It's page Chaf Aleph, daf Chaf Aleph. That little dot on bottom, you can see that little dot is side 1. If there was the second side of the page, it would say Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Amud Daf is a 2-sided page. Amud is a one side of the page. So if you were looking for the Gemara, you would look Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, the front side of page 21, Chaf Aleph, lines 13 through 20. Those are just lines counted from the top. It's usually the way folks in Gemara refer to, since there's not that much in the way of punctuation or stoppages. There are some, but very few. So that's how we refer to it. You would say he's Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, page 32, second side of the page, 10 lines from the bottom, 5 lines from the top. That's usually how it's referred to. Here in our book, we go just plain top to bottom. Okay, lines from the top. Okay, so let's go back now. So now the Gemara, this is, before it was more like just like kind of testing for information. Now we're going to get into some real discussion in the Gemara. And the question that we had, which we discussed last week very quickly again, was, hey Chidami, what's it talking about? How was this, how is there a case that Rabbi Yitzchak's statement would be important, would be a value? Because typically we're learning that when someone loses an object, you can keep it, the finder can keep it when the person was miyayish, when he gave up hope. Yiyush means to give up. Miyayish is like a verb, to give up. So give up is yiyush, to give up is the action of giving up is miyayish. So just remember that term. It's something that we're going to keep throwing around, this entire Gemara. So if the question is if he's miyayish, so what if he gave up hope? Look at, did he put it down with intent to pick it up, or did it fall out? So here we go. Hechi dami. What case specifically was Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? I'm going to just bring it in a little closer because we're going to be doing the text. Okay, so Hechi dami. What is this talking about? Iderach nefila, if it's in a way of falling. Nafal means to fall. Afilu tuva, then even if it's more than a kav in 4 amas, he should keep it. Afilu tuva nami, he should also be able to keep it. V'iderach hinuach, hanacha means to put down. Hinuach, it means he set it down. Afilu batzimri hachin nami, even if it's less than that, you also should not be able to keep it because obviously the person expected it back. Here's just a graphic here to illustrate this. Rav Yitzchak said that a kav in 4 amas, that one kav in 4 amas you're allowed to keep. So we say, what are we talking about? There's a term, the Gemara does not use it here, but you might hear this in yeshiva speak, which is sometimes a mixture of Hebrew and Yiddish and English and Aramaic. So mimanashach, you will hear, is one way or the other. It's like a double trap. Either way, mimanashach, either we have a problem or the term is used for one way or the other. So we're saying if the grain was placed down, if it was placed with intent, so then nobody should be able to keep it no matter how much there is. And if it fell, that means it was obvious that the owner didn't know about it. So here's the question, right? There doesn't seem to be any situation where Rabbi Yitzchak's rule could apply. How could Rabbi Yitzchak be, answering here? What was he talking about? So the Gemara answers, Amar, here's the 5th step. We have a teretz listed as a shield. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama. Rav Ukva Bar Chama explained, B'machnashta debei dari askinan, that it wasn't talking about the way we normally would say an aveda, where it was thrown down or dropped there, but it was more that here's the key here, a grain which had been knowingly left behind. I mean, it's not we find this very often. Let's go back to that potato chip example, right, where we gave a situation where we had a conflict. One Rebbe said that potato chips is a very priyadama, and the other one said that it's a shahakoni abedvarai. And it turned out that they were talking about 2 different cases. This is perhaps the most common teretz, so to speak, the most common way that a Gemara comes to a conclusion of rejecting a question or answering it, in other words, right, one or the other. So we originally thought it was talking about a regular aveda, that we're talking about somebody who lost something. In fact, this was a conscious decision that they had, right? Because Beidar was the threshing floor. Threshing was separating the grain from the husk, from the stuff around it. And they would either do it by having animals trample on it, or they would hit it, or the like, until it was stored. So it's called an Aveda Midas. So here we go. Let's just go back again. Rav Ukva Bar Chama explains, follow the cursor, please, the cursor's right here, that when the Mishnah said a person found scattered produce, it meant he found grain on the threshing floor. Not that it was lost, but rather left there. So the owner knows that his grain is there, right? Of course he knows it, right? Of course he does. Of course he knows that the grain was left. The question is, does he plan to come back for it? That's the question. Then we will have this question about how much is there. If it's a kav and arba amas, he's likely to bend down and pick it up. And if not, he gave up hope of it. He made it hefker. He made it ownerless, and anyone's allowed to take it. Here's just another visual cue. Something that we have throughout the Gemara. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of times there's a lot of research on this, that these types of visual cues or other cues really do help our retention of information. And these are important words for Gemara. The words that I'm going to stress are words that appear very often. If you did not get, I sent last week, I sent out by request, some of you folks requested that I send out the translation of the vocabulary words. If you did not get it, check back to a previous email, or you can drop me an email at the events email address to say I didn't get those, the translation sheets, the vocabulary words sheet, which is in the back of our textbook, our workbook. You can find it there. So the words that I'm going to stress are words that are just like part of the bread and butter of Gemara. These are two very, very common words, so it's worth mentioning them. Hava amina, literal translation is I would have thought. Maskana is bottom line, what it turned out at the end. So very often, Rabbi Spivak uses this, the author of the book, uses these icons to show, to illustrate the fact that a mistake, a havamina that's broken, right? We have a kasha, so that kasha breaks this havamina, right? The significance of this crack and the fact that it's crooked means that there's something wrong with this. The Mishnah was discussing, we thought it was talking about hava amina. I originally thought that it was talking about grain that was lost. And then we found out, no, it was knowingly left behind. It was knowingly left behind on the threshing floor. So the maskana, right, the teretz here, just so you get the chat, let's use some more yeshiva words, right? The chiddush, right, the novel, the purpose of this icon is to show you that the teretz fixes up this broken havamina, what we originally thought, and now we come up with the conclusion, okay? And now this, I know, looks like a lot of words, but the logic part of it, we're basically done. Now we're just going to explain it. Now we're going to explain what Rabbi Yitzchak meant. Remember, we thought that this Rabbi Yitzchak was talking about a lost object. Now it turns out that we're talking about something left behind. So now he says, Kav ba'arba amais. Now again, folks, I would much rather you concentrate on the logic and the steps of the Gemara rather than the translation. You have it right again. If this is your, if this is your first rodeo, it's your first time learning Gemara, just leave the translation for a different day. Right now you have the luxury of a Gemara that has, not just our Gemara, but Gemaras that have punctuation and that have translation. My suggestion is we concentrate on the flow of the logic and the way the Gemara uses this, because okay, so now we're going to explain. Kav ba'arba amais, if there's like one kav in arba amais, the nafish tirchayu, that it's a lot of bother. Okay, it's a great deal of bother to collect all the kernels, right? That's the whisper. To loy tarach inish, a person will not bother to do it. V'loy hadar asi v'shakala, he won't come back and get it. Therefore, or here, rather, right? Afkure mafkilahu, please recognize the words if you can, but don't focus on them. It's a lot of new words. There's no way that you'll be able to keep up with this. Just concentrate on the logic, please. So afkure mafkilahu, he makes them hefker. Hefker is ownerless, and therefore anyone's allowed to take it. But if it's less than that, tarach, he will bother himself. V'hadar asi, and he'll come back. He'll come back to it v'shakale, and he will take it. V'shakalahu, he will take the grain back. V'loi mafkilahu. So, and he won't be mafker. Mafker again means hefker. So what was Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? They were talking about a not something that was lost, but rather something that was left behind. And we call it an aveda, something that's lost, midas, with knowledge. Okay, it's an aveda midas. It was lost object, but he lost it on purpose. That's what it really means, okay? It's not really an aveda. The truth is, again, it's not really an aveda. And what the Mishnah is saying is that if there's in the threshing floor, not a lost object, but something that the guy was working with, he would come back if it's a larger amount, but he won't come back if it's a small amount. And you see here, just another illustration, right? So the two fellas are walking away from this threshing floor, and the thought, this quote in blue, there's more than a kav and 4 amas in the threshing floor. I'll trouble myself to go back and get it because there's lots of grain here. So in all likelihood, he will get it. So therefore, if you walk across a threshing floor and you see and you're hungry and you want to you're poor, you want to collect some grain, or you're not poor, you just like bargains, right? So you're not allowed to take this because the owner is going to come back. And here the fellow says the same thing. There's not more than a kav and 4 amas on the threshing floor. I won't trouble myself to go back and get it. Okay? So that's the end of this shir. Again, we went through this question about what Rabbi Yitzchak exactly was talking about. And we answered, he's talking about the Aveda Midas, not that it was an Aveda with knowledge. Okay, this is put, again, these are the review questions. Folks, again, I'm not going over the vocabulary because it's, remember 2 things at once? We don't do 2 things at once, just forget it for now. It's important that you know translation, but you don't need to know it now. And right now, the focus really should be on this type of thing, which means an understanding of the Gemara and how the steps follow and how the flow charts work. Okay, we translate the following Gemara. I'm just going to do the beginning. I'm not going to do the second part. I'll do the beginning. Hey Chidami, what's it talking about here? Iderech nefila, if it was in a way that it fell, afila tuvanami. Even if there's more stuff, you should be allowed to keep it because the guy doesn't know he lost it. Iderech hinuach, if he left it in a pile that he knew it was there, afila batzum yachinami. Even if there's less, you shouldn't be allowed to keep it. You shouldn't be allowed to keep it. Amar avuk v'bachama b'chnashta debeidari askin. And I'm going to stop here. We're talking about a grain, and then we said this explains the next step. If it's a kav and 4 amas, there's a lot of bother, then he won't go get it. If it's less, then he won't. Okay. What rule did Rabbi Yitzchak teach us? Rabbi Yitzchak taught us, right, that we had in Shir Aleph, that if it's a kav and 4 amas, you're allowed to keep it. What the Hava Amina, we thought, Hava Amina, again, this is a really, really important one. Hava Amina is something that we thought in the first place. We thought he was talking about a lost object, and we had a kasha. So what's Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? If it's right, if it's too much, if he lost it, if it fell down, then he should always be allowed to keep it because the guy doesn't know it's there. If he placed it gently down, then he should be allowed to keep it. So the Gemara answers the maskana, another important word. A maskana, final Gemara, is we said Rabbi Yitzchak was talking about a threshing. And now, why is it not a kasha? Why is the kasha no longer a problem? Because we're talking about an aveda midas, something that was lost. Now, here we go. Please underline the kasha and bracket the teretz. So, hechidami, what's it talking about? Iderech nefila, afila tuvanami, even if it's much more. Afila tuvanami, even if he lost much more than that, he should be allowed to keep it, right? Okay, even if he lost more than that, he should be allowed to keep it. So if we're underlining, we're going to underline all 3 lines. So this is just a long kasha. Remember the first one we had 9 words with 3 steps. Here we have a very long one. So that's the original one. Hechidami, what's it talking about? Iderech nefila. If it fell, afila tuvanami, right? He should be able to keep even more than this. V'derech hinuach, right? If it's the other way around, then he shouldn't be allowed to keep it. Amar v'kvachama, here's the answer. Machnash ve'dari askinan, it's talking about a graining silo, and this is the rest of the logic, which I won't go through all of it, and this ends these 2 steps. Now we have 5 steps, folks, right? 3 from the first year, and 2 from now. I'll leave out the matching. We could number the steps. Okay, let's do it. The sugya at this point, Rabbi Spivak does this very often, where we go over these. This is Shir Aleph and Beis together now. So what are the steps? Matzah Paris Mefuzarin. This is 1. This is a memra, a statement. The Kama, the Gemara asks a kasha, how much? Does it have to be? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, step number 3, Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kav ba'arba amos, the ends over here. Now the Gemara asks, Hey Chidami, what are we talking about? Right? If it was talking about Nefila, he should be allowed to keep anything. And if it's Hinuach, if you put it down, he shouldn't be allowed to keep anything at all. So Namilai, this is where this ends. Amar Avok for Bachama, this is number 5. And this runs down to the end. Okay, so these are the 5 steps that we had so far. And here we have something very, very important. This is the label and summarize is something, folks, I want you all to get really comfortable with this, to be able to follow the steps here. Again, a memra was a statement. If someone says scattered fruit, he could keep it, right? So we had a question, how much? So we answered a kav and 4 amos. Step number 4 is, well, was it fallen or not fallen, right? Did it fall or was it placed? The Gemara says, no, it's talking about a threshing field. Now, this, let me just show you here, folks. We're going to get to other Gemaras later on. If you look at these lines here, this is a straight flow. It's just question, right? A statement, question, answer, and we go through another question. Later on, you'll see in the Gemara, sometimes we get to other types where it actually circles back to the top. I don't want to go into all of this, but just letting you know that logical flow chart for steps are really important. I'll stop for a minute before we. I'd like to take a big bite out of Shir Gimel today. Now that we finished, we were left in the middle of Bays. My goal was to finish Bays and do Gimel. And by the end of the week, Wednesday night, I hope to get to the end of all 6 shiurim. If not, we'll just go back. Does anybody have any questions, folks? I'll stop for a moment. You can chat. You can click on chat if you'd like. And if anything comes to mind, any question that you'd like to ask? We're all good? Wonderful. Okay. Please, I'll stop after the Q&A again. Now this is what I guess we would say a simpler Gemara. This is not very complicated. What we're asking is a number of scenarios that run off this kav and arba amos, 1 kav and 4 amos. Now it seems that there's some sort of ratio here, right? If he has 1 kav for 4 amos, then it's enough of value that the owner will come back, and therefore the person's not allowed to keep it. If it's less than a kav and 4 amos, then he's allowed to keep it because of the person's not going to come back. So the Gemara goes through a number of scenarios now to try to pinpoint a little bit more about how in other words, is the amount more important than the bother? And the Gemara tries to clarify that with other scenarios. This is a she'ela. A she'ela is a she'ela's bir, is a request for information. Ba'i Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the kasha. And here's one of the examples of how we're trying to refine it. In fact, if you see, each of the next 4 shiurim, the Gemara is going to ask a she'ela along these lines. So, Ba'i Rabbi Yirmiyah asks a question. Chatzi kav, chatzi is half. A half a kav, b'shtei amos, in 2 amos, mahu. What would be the halacha if we said 1 kav in 4 amos? How about if it's half a kav in 2 amos? Now, there's a lot of talk in the Mefarshim about why we need each of these cases. I'm just going to keep it very, very simple for now. And I encourage you all to do the same. If you're doing, let's say with an art scroll Gemara, if you remember I showed you this translation, there's like those whispers with bold font and softer font. And the notes on the bottom, I would suggest when the only notes that you should be reading are pshat only the actual text of the Gemara without getting into any other more complicated things. Okay, so just one of the commentaries, one of the Mefarshim points out, that Akhatikav, half a kav, b'shtei amas and 2 amas. If you remember from your days in geometry, right? It's I'm sorry, this is not my oh goodness, this is not my forte, folks. The Akhatikav b'shtei amas, if you have 1 kav in 4 amas is a square of 4 amas by 4 amas. So if it was 2 amas, leave this chart. This is actually for the next piece of Gemara. Leave this little box out. A Akhatikav in 2 amas, it means 2 by 4, not 2 by 2. Okay. Let me try to do this, please, folks. Bear with me. It's just hard to do this with this tool here. If this is 4 by 4, okay. If this is 4 by 4, you would have 16 square amas here. So I just want to point this out because it's important. It might get confusing to you. Half a kav in 2 amas, if it's not a square of 2 by 2, because that would be 1/4 of the space. It should be 1 kav. It should be, a 1/4 of a kav. So it does not mean this. Rather, it means like this. It would be this box. 2 amas, it would be this shaded box here, where it would be 2 by 4. So which is double the size. I'm sorry if it was confusing. With half the size, excuse me. Okay, so when we say Akhatikav, many of the commentaries, the Mefarshim, say that that's what it means. It means 2 by 4, which is half the size. So Rabbi Yirmi asked the question, how about if it's half a kav in 2 amas, what's the rule? Now, here's the logic behind it. Oh, Rabbi did it. I published this book. I should have remembered this. I looked at it this morning. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, our first grandson is getting bar mitzvah Thursday night. So it's just been, Baruch Hashem, very busy and emotional and wonderful. So excuse me if I forgot something like this. So this is a Akhatikav b'arba amas. This, by the way, this does say, here it is actually a square of 2. We'll leave that for later. So if you have a Akhatikav in 4 amas, now what we're really asking, what's the logic behind it? Let's read the text and then we'll explain it. Kav ba'arba amas ta'amamai. What's the reason for a kav in 4 amas? Now again, remember there were 2 things that we could be talking about: the value and the amount of bother. There's really only 2 variables here, right? If you're doing a graph, if you're doing one of those charts, or the y and the z lines, right, and the x. So if you're charting a graph here, there are only 2 variables here. How much merchandise is there of value that a person would consider going back for? That's one. And the second thing is, how much bother is it? And what we're really trying to drill down and figure out, is it more about the bother or is it more about the value? Is it more about the bother and even though both factors might be equally important, the Gemara is trying to drill down and figure this out. So I'm just going to read the text again. Please don't focus on the text. We have time for that. For now, just please focus on the logic. Okay, and remember this is blue here, so we're continuing. Remember where we started. This was a she'ela, so this is a very, very long she'ela. There still is this blue, starting with the she'ela. We're still on step 6 of the Gemara, including this very long text here. And what we're asking is as follows. Let's follow through now. Kav ba'arba amas taimamai. What is the reason? What's the real reason that a person can keep them? If it's mishum de nafesh tirchayu, if the main issue is how much bother is that more important than the value? So if it's the guy won't come back because spreading out over 4 amas is a tremendous amount of work. Akhatikav b'shtei amas, maybe if it's a half a kav and 2 amas, kivan deloy nafesh terchayu, it's not that much of a bother. Loy mafka lahu, he won't make it hefker. Again, Let's read Rabbi Spivak's translation here. If the main reason, not the translation, this is translation, the text here, the explanation. If the main reason that he won't come back for a kav and 4 amas is because collecting it is too much of a bother, that's the problem. He might feel differently if it's not that much bother, right? Because it's much less bother to collect a smaller amount, okay? Idilma, or the other way around, maybe mishum d'loi chashivi, there isn't enough. It's not chashiv, you may have heard that, right? Chashivi is chashiv, is valuable. There's not that much stuff for him to go back. Look, I'm not going back for one kav. I'm not interested. That's more important than whether and how far it's spread. If there's enough value, I'll get down on my hands and knees and collect it. Okay? So v'chatzikav v'shtei amas kiven d'loi chashivi, it's even less chashiv, mafkilahu. The Gemara actually is going, so, well, let's leave that for later. So now the Gemara is asking a question, a she'ela, what is this a formula 1 to 4, 1 kav to 4 amas? And that would be, so if you had 100 kav, it would be 400 amas, right? Is it just a strict rational formula, or is one thing more important than the other? That's really the crux of the question. Okay, so here we go again. It's possible that the reason that the owner will not come back for a kav and 4 amas has nothing to do with how much bother, or very little to do. Rather, he makes it hefker because it's not valuable enough to go back for. It's not worth his time. So a kav in half a kav in 2 amas surely isn't worth enough. So here we go. 1 kav and 4, this is a logical flow of the 2 ways that we can interpret this. We started out with this: a kav and 4 amas, the owner will not come back. So if the bother is more important, you see the guy bending down, another visual aid, folks. So if the bother is the biggest thing, then if there's not so much bother, because it's a smaller space, then maybe he'll come back. However, if it's the money, if it's the value, then if there's less value, for sure he won't come back. So in a half a kav, see, here's the amount, a half a kav in 2 amas, it would really depend on what the real reason behind it is. Okay, and we end this shir. Remember, there's only one step really. Let's do the text one more time. Rabbi Yirmi asked the question: Akhatikav v'shtei amas mahu? Half a kav and 2 amas. What's the halacha? Question mark here, right? Kav ba'arba amas time amai. Why do we say 1 kav and 4 amas? Mishum d'nafesh terchayo, because it's a big bother. Chatzikav v'shtei amas, it's not such a big bother. Maybe he'll go back for it, and he's not making it hefkin, therefore you can't keep it. Or maybe if it's the main thing, is it chashiv or not? And then chatzikav v'shtei amas would not be chashiv, and therefore he'll be able to keep it. Okay. So who's asking a shaila? Let's go through this. Who's asking the shaila? Ba'i Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah was the one who initiated this question. Let's go over some of these questions. What's the case of his shaila? The shaila was, how about half a kav in 2 amas? What's the halacha kav and 4 amas? You're allowed to keep it. And which of the following is a bigger bother to collect? So certainly this one would be a bigger bother. That's the answer to this question, because it's a bigger space. Now there's more value, but it's a bigger bother because of the 4 amas. But there's more value there. And which is more valuable? Chatzikav v'shtei amas. Okay. Okay. And what's the svara? What's the svara as a logic to say that the case of Hasha'ela should have the same halacha as the kav and 4 amas? That would depend if it was more of a bother, or if it was more of a, or if it was more in value. What type of step is this? Right? We said that this is a she'ela, and we just add this on. We don't even, Rebbe didn't bother going over the last step. I'm going to take just a little nibble out of Shir Daled, because it really does flow with Shir Gimel, and I'm just going to do a little bit of it to give you the big idea and then we'll go back and take some questions. In Shir Gimel, we learned that Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the she'ela, and the she'ela was, the question was, now we didn't answer the question, right? So this is Rabbi Spivak patiently taking us through it. However, before the Gemara has a chance to respond, Rabbi Yirmiyah asks another similar she'ela. So it's a similar she'ela, you'll see the point. So Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking about a case similar to kav ba'arba amas. Here we go. Kabayim are two kav. Okay, kabayim, two kav. B'shmoina amas mahu. In 8 amas mahu. What is the halacha? And again, the same. You'll obviously will have the same question. These are two kav in 8 amas in a much larger space. Okay, so here's showing us 8 amas. And the question is, do you say this because of a bother? Then kabayim b'shmoina amas is a huge bother. And if you say it's because of value, so then you would say there's more stuff there, so he's more likely to go bother himself and come back. So that's basically how the Gemara is going to flow. As I said, the sugya of Yish Shalamidas, which after this series I'm going to start again. I'll invite any of you who want to, and others who want to learn it. It's a very way more complicated than this. Thankfully, the Gemara starts off giving us these examples of how Gemara logic works in a way that's relatively more simple and easier to digest. Okay, so let's get quickly. We're going to stop here,